You think she's over you because she's silent, but what if that silence is exactly where the feelings are getting stronger? Most men make the same mistake. When a woman goes quiet, they assume it's over. No texts, no calls, no signs of interest, so the conclusion feels obvious, she's moved on. But what you don't see is what's happening beneath that silence. Because silence doesn't always mean absence of emotion. Sometimes it means the presence of too many emotions being processed at once. When she pulls away and goes silent, it often means she's trying to create space, not just from you, but from the intensity of what she was feeling. Emotions don't just disappear overnight, they don't switch off like a button. Instead, they need time to settle, to be understood, to be reorganized. And that process almost always happens in silence. In the beginning, her silence might look like distance, but internally, there's a conversation happening. She's replaying moments, thinking about how things felt, questioning what went right and what went wrong. And the more space there is, the more those thoughts begin to echo. Because when you're no longer there to create new experiences, the mind naturally goes back to the past to fill that gap. This is where most men sabotage themselves. They see the silence and panic. They reach out too much, try to force communication or seek reassurance. But what that does is interrupt her process. Instead of allowing her to reflect and feel the absence naturally, you reinsert yourself in a way that removes the space she needs to actually miss you. Silence, when handled correctly, becomes powerful. It creates contrast. When you're always there, your presence becomes normal. But when you're gone, your absence becomes noticeable. And it's in that absence that she begins to feel what's missing. She might not show it. She might not post about it. She might not even admit it to herself right away, but internally there's a shift happening because now she's not reacting to you, she's reflecting on you. And reflection is where emotions deepen, not through constant interaction, but through space, through distance, through the quiet moments where there's nothing to distract her from her own thoughts. This is why you have to trust the process instead of trying to control it. You don't chase silence, you allow it. You don't fill every gap, you let the gap exist, because that gap is where curiosity begins to grow, where memories start to resurface, and where feelings can evolve without pressure. What feels like the end is often just the beginning of a different phase, one that you can't see, but one that plays a bigger role than anything you could say or do in the moment. Because sometimes the strongest emotions don't show up in words, they grow quietly in the space you're no longer filling. The moment you stop chasing her is the moment something shifts, and most men don't even realize it's happening. Because when you're constantly reaching out, trying to keep the connection alive, you're actually removing any reason for her to think about you. You're always there, always available, always predictable. There's no mystery, no space, no reason for her mind to wander back to you. But when you genuinely pull back, not as a tactic, but because you're focused on your own life, everything changes. Your absence creates a gap, and that gap doesn't just sit there empty. It gets filled by her thoughts, her curiosity, and her questions. She starts to notice that you're no longer showing up the way you used to. The messages stop. The attention disappears. The emotional availability she once had access to is no longer there. And at first, she might not react. She might even feel relieved, especially if she was overwhelmed before. But that feeling doesn't last because over time, that silence becomes noticeable, it becomes different, and different creates curiosity. She begins to wonder what you're doing, why you're not reaching out, whether you've moved on, or if something has changed in you. And these questions start to pull her attention back toward you, even though you're not doing anything directly. This is the power of emotional detachment. It's not about ignoring her or pretending you don't care. It's about no longer placing your focus on her as the center of your world. It's about redirecting your energy toward your own growth, your own purpose, your own life. And when you do that, you naturally become less available, not just physically, but emotionally. And that emotional shift is what she feels because now, instead of you chasing her, she's left with her own thoughts. Instead of reacting to your presence, she's responding to your absence. And absence has a way of amplifying value in a way that constant presence never can. She may start checking your social media, looking for signs of what you're doing. She may think about reaching out but hesitate. She may even feel a subtle pull she can't fully explain. And all of this begins with one simple change. You stop chasing. What's important here is authenticity. If you pretend to pull back while still obsessing over her, it won't have the same effect. She'll still feel that energy, But when you truly let go of the need to control the outcome, when you genuinely focus on your own path, that's when the shift becomes real, because now you're not reacting to her, you're living your life regardless of her. And that's what creates attraction in its purest form. Not effort, not pressure, not persuasion, but space, mystery, and emotional independence. And in that space, her curiosity begins to grow quietly, steadily, and powerfully. When you're constantly in someone's life, your presence becomes familiar, and familiarity over time can start to feel ordinary. Not because you lack value, but because human nature tends to normalize what it experiences consistently. The attention you gave, the time you invested, the way you showed up, it all became part of her everyday reality. And when something is always there, it's easy to overlook its true worth. But the moment that consistency disappears, everything changes. Your absence creates contrast. What once felt normal now feels missing. The texts that used to come regularly are no longer there. The emotional support she could rely on is gone. The presence she didn't have to think about suddenly becomes something she can't ignore. And it's in that absence that your value begins to rise in her perception. This isn't about playing games, it's about allowing reality to speak for itself. When you're no longer filling that space in her life, she starts to feel the difference. And that difference creates awareness. She may not consciously sit down and list out everything you brought into her life, but she feels it in moments. Maybe it's when she has something to share and realizes you're not the person she can go to anymore. Maybe it's when she notices that others don't listen the same way, don't show the same consistency, or don't create the same emotional comfort. These small realizations begin to add up, and over time, they form a new perspective. The same qualities she once took for granted now stand out. Your reliability, your presence, your energy, things that were once expected are now appreciated, but only because they're no longer accessible. This is how distance reshapes perception. It removes the idealios of something and replaces it with awareness of its absence. At the same time, you're not there to dilute that realization. You're not reaching out to remind her of your value. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply living your life focused and grounded. And that lack of neediness reinforces the shift even more. Because now she's not seeing you as someone who's always available. She's seeing you as someone who has his own direction, his own priorities, his own life. And that independence naturally increases attraction. It creates a sense of respect, even if it's unspoken. She may begin to wonder if she misjudged you, if she underestimated what you brought into her life, if maybe, just maybe, what you walked away from was more valuable than she initially believed. And these thoughts don't come from anything you say, they come from what she experiences in your absence. This is why staying consistent in your own growth is so important. Because as your life continues to move forward, your value doesn't just remain, it increases. And the more she feels that difference over time, the more your absence turns into something meaningful. Because what's no longer available often becomes what's most appreciated. There comes a moment when you realize that waiting is costing you more than trying ever will. You start to understand that hesitation, overthinking, and fear of judgment have been quietly stealing your time, your energy, and your potential. And the truth is, nothing in life changes until you decide to move, even when you don't feel fully ready, because readiness is not a feeling, it's a decision. Too many people sit on the edge of their dreams, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect confidence, but perfection is an illusion. The people you admire, the ones who seem confident and successful, they didn't start that way. They started uncertain, nervous, and sometimes even afraid. The only difference is they didn't let that stop them. They took the first step anyway. And that's what you have to understand. Progress is born from action, not from thinking. You can plan all day, you can imagine every possible outcome, but until you move, nothing changes. Action creates clarity, action builds confidence, action turns fear into fuel. Every small step you take rewires your mindset, proving to yourself that you are capable of more than you once believed. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to start where you are with what you have, because growth doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in motion. It happens when you push past excuses, when you silence the voice that tells you to wait, and when you show up, even on the days you don't feel like it. There will be moments when things don't go your way. You might fail, you might fall short, and you might question yourself. But failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of it. Every mistake carries a lesson, every setback builds resilience, and every challenge shapes you into someone stronger. What matters is not how many times you fall, but how many times you choose to rise again. And as you keep going, something powerful begins to happen. The fear that once held you back starts to fade. The doubts become quieter. The confidence you were waiting for begins to grow within you, not because everything became easy, but because you became stronger. So stop waiting for a sign, stop waiting for perfect conditions, and stop underestimating what you're capable of. The life you want is built through consistent action, not hesitation. Take that step, no matter how small it seems, because every step forward brings you closer to the person you are meant to become. And once you start, don't stop. At some point, you have to stop looking outside for validation and start building a belief system within yourself. Because if your confidence depends on other people, on their approval, their attention, or their recognition, then your sense of worth will always be unstable. One day you'll feel on top of the world, and the next completely lost. Real confidence doesn't come from being praised, it comes from knowing who you are, regardless of who is watching. You have to understand that people's opinions are constantly changing. What one person admires, another may criticize. If you keep adjusting yourself to fit everyone's expectations, you'll lose your identity in the process. And the harsh reality is, no matter what you do, not everyone will support you. So, why not focus on becoming someone you respect instead? When you start relying on your own standards, everything shifts. You begin to make decisions based on growth, not fear. You stop chasing approval and start chasing purpose. And that's where true freedom lies, when your actions are no longer controlled by the need to be accepted, but by the desire to improve. This doesn't mean you ignore feedback or isolate yourself. It means you learn to filter what truly matters. Constructive advice helps you grow, but unnecessary criticism should not define you. You must develop the strength to listen without losing yourself, to adapt without compromising your values, and to grow without seeking permission. The more you invest in yourself, your mindset, your discipline, your habits, the less you'll need validation from others. You'll start noticing your own progress. You'll begin to trust your decisions. And slowly, that inner confidence becomes unshakable. It's no longer about proving anything to anyone, it's about becoming better than you were yesterday. And remember, self respect is built through consistency. It's built when you keep promises to yourself, when you show up even when it's hard, and when you choose growth over comfort. Every time you follow through on what you said you do, you strengthen that inner voice that says, I can rely on myself. There will still be moments of doubt. That's normal. But instead of letting those doubts control you, use them as reminders of how far you've come. Remind yourself that you've handled challenges before, that you've grown through discomfort, and that you're capable of doing it again. So stop measuring your worth through other people's eyes. Stop waiting for someone to tell you that you're good enough. You don't need external permission to become who you're meant to be. Everything you need is already within you. You just have to trust it, build it, and act on it. Because in the end, the strongest confidence is the one that comes from within. And once you have that, nothing outside you can take it away. There comes a moment where you realize that everything you've been chasing on the outside, attention, validation, closure, was never the thing that was going to fix what you feel inside. And that realization can either break you or it can transform you. Because the truth is, the moment you stop making someone else the center of your world is the exact moment you start becoming the person they can't ignore anymore. When you detach, not out of anger, but out of self respect, your energy changes. You stop overthinking every message, every memory, every what if. You stop replaying the past and start focusing on what you can control, your growth, your purpose, your direction. And ironically, that's when everything begins to shift in your favor. Most people get this wrong. They think holding on shows strength, that constantly reaching out proves how much they care. But real strength is shown in your ability to let go when something no longer serves you. It's in your ability to walk away with dignity, even when part of you wants to stay. Because when you hold on too tightly, you lose your power. But when you let go, you regain control over your life. And here's what happens next: when you genuinely move on, when you stop waiting, when you stop needing anything from them, you become unpredictable. You're no longer that person they can rely on for attention or emotional support. And that absence creates space for them to think, to wonder, to feel what it's like without you. But this isn't about manipulation. It's about transformation because if your goal is just to get someone back without changing who you are, you'll end up in the same cycle again. The real goal is to evolve into someone stronger, more grounded, and more self aware. Someone who doesn't lose themselves in relationships, but enhances their life through them. As you grow, your priorities shift. You start valuing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and respect over temporary emotions. You begin to see things for what they truly are, not what you hoped they would be. And that clarity allows you to make better decisions, not just in love, but in every area of your life. And sometimes, yes, they do come back, not because you chase them, not because you convince them, but because they see the change. They feel the difference. They recognize that you're no longer the same person they walked away from. But by that time, something inside you has changed too. You're no longer desperate for their return. You're no longer waiting because now you understand your worth. And when you truly understand your worth, you don't chase, you attract. You don't beg, you choose, and you don't settle, you rise.